Hashtag the Phantom Shooter. Document 1. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky hills of Afghanistan as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his scope for what would become the most important shot of his career. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything he thought he knew about warfare, brotherhood, and legends. Marcus had been deployed with SEAL Team 6 for 18 months. At 28 years old, he was considered one of the best snipers in his unit. His record was impressive: 43 confirmed kills, 0 missed targets when lives were on the line. But today felt different. Today, something was watching him. The mission was supposed to be routine. Intelligence had located a high-value target in a compound 3 miles east of their position. Taliban commander Khalil Nasir had been responsible for planning attacks that killed dozens of American soldiers. The order was simple: eliminate the threat. Marcus and his spotter, Corporal Jake Thompson, had been in position since before dawn. They lay hidden among the rocks, their ghillie suits making them invisible against the desert landscape. Jake peered through his binoculars while Marcus tracked movement through his rifle scope. Movement in the compound, Jake whispered. 2 guards on the roof, 1 by the main entrance. Marcus adjusted his breathing, feeling the familiar calm that came before a shot. His finger rested lightly on the trigger as he watched for their target. Years of training had taught him patience. A sniper who rushed was a dead sniper. Then he saw him. Khalil Nasir stepped onto a balcony, clearly visible through the scope. The distance was 847 meters. Wind was minimal. It should have been an easy shot for someone of Marcus's skill. He was about to squeeze the trigger when something impossible happened. A voice came through his earpiece, speaking in perfect English with no accent Marcus could identify. "Hold your fire, Rodriguez. Nasir has a child on his lap. Check your scope." Marcus blinked hard and looked again. Sure enough, a small girl, maybe 4 years old, was sitting on Nasir's knee. She hadn't been there seconds before, or maybe Marcus had been too focused on his target to notice her. "Who is this?" Marcus whispered into his radio. "Identify yourself." Silence. Jake looked at him strangely. "Who are you talking to? Command hasn't said anything in 20 minutes. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "You didn't hear that voice? Someone just warned me about a child." "Negative. Radio's been quiet." Jake checked his equipment. "Maybe you're hearing some crosstalk from another frequency." But Marcus knew what he'd heard. The voice had been clear, calm, and had saved him from making a terrible mistake. Taking a shot with a civilian, especially a child, in the line of fire would have ended his career and haunted him forever. They waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, Nasir stood up alone, the child nowhere to be seen. Marcus took the shot. Clean kill, 847 meters. Mission accomplished. But the mystery voice stayed with him. Back at base, Marcus asked around. No other teams were operating in their area. No one had radio contact with their position during the time in question. The communications log showed no transmissions to their frequency for over 3 hours. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind. The voice had been so clear, so certain. It had known his name, known exactly what he was seeing through his scope. But, according to everyone else, it had never happened. 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself in a similar situation. This time, the target was an explosives expert hiding in a small village. Marcus had a clear shot from 623 meters when the voice came again. Wind shift coming from the east in 10 seconds. Just 2 clicks right. Marcus looked at Jake, who was monitoring weather conditions. Any wind change coming? Jake checked his instruments and shook his head. Steady as she goes. But Marcus trusted the voice. He made the adjustment just as a sudden gust of wind kicked up dust and debris. His shot was perfect, right where it needed to be. This time, Jake noticed something. "How did you know about that wind?" "My equipment didn't pick it up until after you adjusted." Marcus couldn't explain it. The voice seemed to know things before they happened, to see things he couldn't see. But he was the only one who could hear it. Word began to spread through the SEAL community about Marcus's incredible accuracy. His success rate was becoming legendary. Other snipers started asking for his secrets, his techniques. But how could he explain that a mysterious voice was guiding his shots? The voice came more frequently now. Sometimes it would warn him about enemy movement he hadn't spotted. Other times it would suggest adjustments to his position that later proved crucial. Always in English, always calm, always right. But it wasn't just helping with shots. One morning, as Marcus's team prepared to enter a supposedly empty building, the voice spoke urgently in his earpiece. Stop. IED under the stairs, pressure plate trigger. Send the robot first. Marcus called for a halt, claiming he'd spotted something suspicious. The bomb disposal unit found exactly what the voice had described, a sophisticated improvised explosive device that would have killed his entire team. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, started taking notice. Rodriguez, your instincts have been exceptional lately. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. If only she knew the truth. Marcus began researching, trying to find any explanation for what was happening to him. He read about radio interference, psychological stress, and even supernatural encounters reported by soldiers throughout history. Nothing fit exactly what he was experiencing. The voice never identified itself, never engaged in conversation. It only spoke when necessary, always with information that saved lives or completed missions. Marcus began to think of it as his guardian angel, though he wasn't particularly religious. Other members of his unit started noticing Marcus's strange behavior. He would sometimes pause mid-conversation, tilting his head as if listening to something only he could hear. He would make tactical decisions that seemed to come from nowhere but always proved correct. Sergeant First Class Tony Martinez, a 20-year veteran, pulled Marcus aside after a particularly successful mission. Son, I've been watching you. You're operating on a different level than the rest of us. I've seen good soldiers, and I've seen great soldiers. But what you're doing, it's like you've got inside information. Marcus wanted to tell him everything. But who would believe him? A mysterious voice that only he could hear, providing perfect intelligence and tactical advice. It sounded like the ravings of someone suffering from combat stress. But the voice was real. It had saved his life, saved his team's lives, and helped them complete mission after mission with zero casualties. Whatever it was, wherever it came from, Marcus had learned to trust it completely. One evening, as Marcus cleaned his rifle in his bunk, Jake approached him with a serious expression. Mark, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Are you getting intel from someone outside official channels? Because some of the things you've been calling, there's no way you could have known them through normal observation. Marcus looked at his friend and spotter, the person who knew his capabilities better than anyone. Jake, what if I told you something that sounded completely crazy but explained everything? Try me. Marcus took a deep breath. I hear a voice in my earpiece. It gives me information, warnings, tactical advice. I'm the only one who can hear it. I don't know who it is or where it comes from, but it's never been wrong. Jake stared at him for a long moment, then sat down heavily on his own bunk. That's either the craziest thing I've ever heard, or it explains why you've become the best sniper I've ever worked with. You think I'm losing it? No, Jake said slowly. I think something is happening that we don't understand. But whatever it is, it's keeping us alive and helping us win. Maybe that's all that matters. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about Jake's words. Maybe his friend was right. Maybe it didn't matter where the voice came from or why only he could hear it. Maybe what mattered was that it was helping them save lives and complete their mission. But deep down, Marcus knew this was bigger than just tactical advice. Someone or something was watching over him, guiding him, protecting him and his team. The question was why? What made him special? What made him worthy of this mysterious assistance? The answers would come, but not in ways he could ever have imagined. Hashtag the Phantom Shooter. Document 26 months after the voice first spoke to him. Marcus Rodriguez received an assignment that would test everything he thought he knew about his mysterious guide. The mission briefing came directly from Joint Special Operations Command, marked with the highest classification levels. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes gathered the team in a secure briefing room. Maps of the Pakistani border region covered the walls, marked with red zones indicating heavy Taliban presence. The air conditioning hummed quietly, but Marcus could feel sweat forming under his uniform. Gentlemen, we have a problem, Hayes began, clicking a remote that brought up satellite images on the main screen. 3 days ago, a Chinook helicopter carrying 12 Navy SEALs was shot down in this valley. We have confirmation that at least 4 survivors made it out of the crash site. The room fell silent. Every SEAL understood the gravity of the situation. Brothers were trapped behind enemy lines, and time was running out. Hayes continued. The Taliban has flooded the area with fighters. Conservative estimates put enemy strength at over 200 combatants. The survivors are believed to be hiding in these caves. She pointed to a series of dark spots on the mountainside. Extraction teams have been unable to reach them due to heavy anti-aircraft fire. Marcus studied the terrain through the satellite images. The valley was a natural killing field, surrounded by high ridges that provided perfect sniper positions for the enemy. Any rescue attempt would be a nightmare of overlapping fields of fire and limited escape routes. Your mission, Hayes said, looking directly at Marcus, is to provide overwatch and eliminate high-value targets that are coordinating the search for our people. Intelligence indicates that a Taliban commander named Hakim Shah is personally leading the hunt. He's smart, experienced, and he knows these mountains better than anyone. The plan was complex. Marcus and Jake would be inserted by helicopter onto a ridge 2 miles from the valley. From there, they would have to move on foot to a position that gave them clear sight lines into the enemy's operational area. Other SEAL teams would coordinate the actual rescue attempt, but Marcus's job was to even the odds by removing key enemy leaders. As the briefing ended and the team dispersed to prepare their equipment, Marcus felt a familiar sensation. The voice spoke quietly in his earpiece, though he wasn't even wearing his combat radio yet. This mission is different, Marcus. You will need to trust me completely. The enemy knows you are coming. Marcus stopped walking and looked around the empty briefing room. How was this possible? He wasn't wearing any radio equipment, and the voice had never spoken to him on base before. Who are you? He whispered, hoping for an answer he'd never received. Silence. That night, Marcus packed his gear with extra care. His Macmillan TAC .338 sniper rifle was cleaned and zeroed. He packed 150 rounds of match-grade ammunition, his spotting scope, weather monitoring equipment, and enough food and water for 3 days. But, as he worked, his mind kept returning to the voice's warning. The enemy knows you are coming. How could that be possible? The mission was classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people knew the details. But the voice had never been wrong before. Jake found him in the armory, still methodically checking his equipment for the 3rd time. You're nervous, Jake observed. I've never seen you check your gear this many times. Something feels off about this mission, Marcus admitted. I can't explain it, but I think we're walking into a trap. Jake sat down on a nearby crate. Is it the voice? Marcus nodded. Over the past months, he had shared more details about his mysterious guide with Jake. His spotter had seen too much to doubt that something unusual was happening, even if he couldn't explain it. What did it tell you? That the enemy knows we're coming. Jake considered this for a moment. Well, if that's true, we'd better be ready for anything. The helicopter insertion went smoothly. Marcus and Jake were dropped on the ridge at 0300 hours, under cover of darkness. The flight crew departed quickly, leaving them alone in the silent mountains. They had 6 hours to reach their overwatch position before sunrise exposed them to enemy observation. Moving through the rocky terrain in full combat gear was exhausting work. Each step had to be carefully planned to avoid loose stones that might give away their position. They moved in complete silence, communicating only through hand signals when necessary. As they approached their planned position, Marcus heard the voice again. Stop. 3 snipers in the rocks ahead. They have been waiting for you since yesterday. Marcus immediately signaled Jake to freeze. They dropped prone behind a large boulder, hearts pounding. Marcus scanned the area ahead through his night vision scope, but saw nothing. The voice continued. 200 meters ahead, 11 o'clock. Sniper in traditional clothing with a Dragunov rifle. Second position at 1 o'clock, 180 meters. Third sniper directly ahead at 250 meters, higher elevation. Marcus whispered the information to Jake, who began scanning with his own optics. After several minutes, Jake tapped Marcus's shoulder and pointed. There, barely visible even with night vision, was the outline of a human figure among the rocks. They had indeed been walking into a trap. Marcus and Jake spent the next hour slowly working their way around the enemy positions. The voice guided them through a route that kept them out of sight, leading them to an alternate position that actually provided better fields of view than their original plan. As dawn broke over the valley, Marcus could see the scope of the enemy presence. The satellite images hadn't shown the full picture. Taliban fighters were positioned throughout the area, with overlapping patrol routes and communication networks. It was a sophisticated operation, not the disorganized militia fighting they had expected. Through his scope, Marcus identified the command post. A group of men in clean uniforms were gathered around maps and radio equipment. One man stood apart from the others, clearly in charge. Even from a distance of over a kilometer, Marcus could see that this was someone important. Target identified, Marcus reported through his radio. Adult male, appears to be senior leadership, in the command group at grid reference 41 RQM 315678. The voice spoke again. That is Hakim Shah. But he is not your primary target today. Wait. Marcus was confused. Shah was exactly who they had been sent to eliminate. But he had learned to trust the voice, even when its instructions seemed to contradict the mission. What do you mean, wait? Marcus whispered. Jake looked at him questioningly, hearing only half of the conversation. The voice explained, Shah is expecting to be targeted. He has body doubles and will not expose himself until he believes the sniper threat has been eliminated. You must wait for the real target. Marcus relayed this information to his command, causing confusion in the Tactical Operations Center. But before anyone could question his judgment, the situation in the valley changed dramatically. A convoy of vehicles approached the command post, kicking up clouds of dust. As they stopped, armed men jumped out and took defensive positions. Then, from the lead vehicle, emerged a figure that Marcus recognized from intelligence briefings. It was not Hakim Shah. It was someone much more important, Mullah Omar Rahman, a Taliban leader responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. Rahman was on the high-value target list, but intelligence had placed him hundreds of miles away. Now you see, the voice said calmly. Rahman is here to personally oversee the elimination of the trapped SEALs. He believes this will be a major propaganda victory. Your mission has just become much more important. Marcus adjusted his scope to track Rahman as he moved through the command post. The distance was 1,347 meters, well within his capabilities but challenging due to the mountainous terrain and unpredictable wind patterns. As Rahman met with Shah and other commanders, Marcus prepared for what might be the most important shot of his career. But the voice wasn't finished with its guidance. Do not take the shot yet. In 47 minutes, Rahman will move to a position near the cave entrance to observe the search operation. The angle will be better, and there will be no civilians in the background. Marcus lowered his rifle and settled in to wait. Jake looked at him in surprise. Command is asking why you haven't taken the shot, Jake whispered. Rahman is right there in the open. We wait, Marcus said simply. For the next hour, Marcus ignored increasingly urgent radio calls asking for his status. His commanding officers couldn't understand why their best sniper was hesitating when presented with such a high-value target. But Marcus had learned that the voice saw things he couldn't see, knew things he couldn't know. He waited. Exactly 47 minutes later, Rahman and a small group of commanders moved toward the cave system where the trapped SEALs were believed to be hiding. As they took position on a rocky outcrop, Marcus could see that the angle was indeed perfect. More importantly, he could see that Rahman's original position had been a trap. Where Rahman had been standing earlier, Marcus now noticed the barely visible shapes of anti-sniper teams positioned to triangulate on any shooter who revealed their position. If he had taken that first shot, he would have been dead within seconds. The voice had saved his life again. Marcus steadied his rifle and controlled his breathing. Through his scope, Rahman appeared clear and centered. The wind was calm. Range, 1,127 meters. Perfect conditions. But, as his finger tightened on the trigger, Marcus noticed something that made him pause. Rahman was holding a radio, apparently receiving urgent communication. His body language suggested something important was happening. The voice spoke urgently. Take the shot now. He has just received word that the SEALs have been found. In 30 seconds, he will order their immediate execution. Marcus didn't hesitate. The rifle cracked once, the sound echoing across the valley. Through his scope, he watched Rahman fall, the radio spinning away from his lifeless hand. The effect was immediate. Taliban fighters throughout the valley began shouting and pointing in different directions, confused about where the shot had come from. The careful organization of their operation dissolved into chaos as commanders tried to regain control without their supreme leader. Within minutes, rescue helicopters appeared over the ridge, swooping down into the valley under covering fire from Apache gunships. The Taliban forces, leaderless and disorganized, couldn't mount an effective response. Marcus watched through his scope as 4 surviving SEALs were pulled from a cave and loaded onto a rescue helicopter. The mission was a complete success, but Marcus knew it wouldn't have been possible without the Voice's guidance. As Marcus and Jake prepared to move to their extraction point, the Voice spoke one more time. "Well done, Marcus. But your real test is still coming. Everything you have experienced so far has been preparation for something much larger." Marcus wanted to ask what it meant, but he already knew the Voice wouldn't answer. It never explained itself, never revealed its plans. It simply guided him from one mission to the next, always keeping him one step ahead of disaster. But as they made their way through the mountains toward safety, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being prepared for something extraordinary. Something that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. Hashtag the Phantom Shooter. Document 3. The call came at 0347 hours on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. Marcus Rodriguez was pulled from sleep by the urgent beeping of his secure communication device. The message was brief but chilling. "Report to JSOC immediately. Highest priority. Operation Ghost Walker is compromised." Operation Ghost Walker was the most classified mission Marcus had ever been briefed on. For 3 months, intelligence agencies had been tracking a terrorist cell planning a massive attack on American soil. The cell's leader, known only as the Engineer, had designed a new type of explosive device that could level city blocks while remaining undetectable by conventional security measures. What made this situation even more dangerous was that the Engineer was a former American military explosives expert who had gone rogue after his family was killed in a drone strike he believed was unnecessary. He knew American tactics, American technology, and American weaknesses better than almost anyone alive. As Marcus drove through the pre-dawn darkness to the Joint Special Operations Command facility, he replayed everything he knew about the mission. Intelligence had finally located the Engineer in a compound in Syria, but the window for action was closing rapidly. Satellite imagery suggested he was preparing to leave for an unknown destination, possibly to personally oversee the final stages of his planned attack. The briefing room was packed with the highest levels of military and intelligence leadership. General Patricia Williamson, the JSOC commander, stood before a wall of monitors displaying real-time satellite feeds from Syria. "Gentlemen, we have a problem," she began without preamble. "The Engineer is moving faster than we anticipated. Our human intelligence assets report that he will be departing his current location within the next 18 hours. If we lose him now, American cities will be at risk within the week." The satellite images showed a heavily fortified compound surrounded by multiple layers of security. Anti-aircraft batteries, patrol routes, and sniper positions were clearly visible. It looked more like a military base than a terrorist hideout. "A direct assault is impossible," the general continued. "The compound is too well defended, and the Engineer has contingency plans to destroy all evidence if he's attacked conventionally. Our only option is a precision strike to eliminate him before he can escape." Marcus felt his stomach tighten as he realized why he had been called in. This was a job for a sniper, but the shot would be unlike anything attempted before. General Williamson clicked to the next slide, showing elevation maps and wind patterns around the compound. "The only viable sniper position is here," she said, pointing to a mountain ridge, 3,247 meters from the target building. This would be the longest confirmed sniper shot in military history. The room fell silent. Even with the most advanced equipment available, a shot at that distance was considered virtually impossible. Wind variations, bullet drop, and target movement would all combine to make accuracy extremely unlikely. But Marcus felt the familiar sensation of the voice beginning to speak in his mind, even though he wasn't wearing any radio equipment. "This is why you were chosen, Marcus. Everything until now has been training for this moment. You will not be making this shot alone." General Williamson continued the briefing, explaining the timeline and extraction procedures. But Marcus was barely listening. The voice was showing him things, helping him understand the shot in ways that defied conventional ballistics. The wind patterns at this altitude follow a predictable cycle every 43 minutes. The building has thermal properties that will create specific air currents. The engineer has a daily routine that places him in a precise location for exactly 90 seconds each morning. Marcus raised his hand, interrupting the general's presentation. "Ma'am, I need to see the meteorological data for the target area, specifically wind patterns and thermal imaging of the building structure." General Williamson looked surprised. "Staff Sergeant, the shot parameters we've calculated are based on the best available atmospheric data. With respect, ma'am, I believe there are factors we haven't considered. I'd like to review the raw data myself." For the next 6 hours, Marcus studied every piece of information available about the target area. Weather patterns, building blueprints, thermal signatures, even the psychological profile of the engineer. To everyone else, it looked like intensive preparation. But Marcus was really learning to interpret what the voice was showing him. The voice revealed details that didn't appear in any intelligence report. It showed him how morning sunlight would create specific shadows in the compound, how the mountain terrain would channel wind currents, and exactly where the engineer would be standing when the shot became possible. Jake Thompson, who had been assigned as his spotter for this mission, found Marcus in the data analysis room late that night. "Mark, you've been staring at these screens for 12 hours. What are you seeing that the intelligence analysts missed?" Marcus looked at his friend and partner, knowing he could never fully explain what was happening. "Jake, what if I told you I could make this shot? Not probably, not maybe, but absolutely certain I could make it." Jake studied his face. "I'd say you've lost your mind. Even you can't guarantee a shot at over 3 kilometers. But what if I could? What if something was guiding the shot, ensuring it would hit exactly where it needed to?" Jake sat down heavily. They had been through too much together for him to dismiss Marcus's claims. "The voice again?" Marcus nodded. "It's different this time. Stronger. More detailed. It's showing me things about the shot that I couldn't possibly know through normal means." The insertion went flawlessly. Marcus and Jake were transported by stealth helicopter to within 20 kilometers of the target area, then moved on foot through rugged mountain terrain for 8 hours to reach their position. They carried specialized equipment designed specifically for extreme long-range shooting, including a custom-built rifle and ammunition designed for maximum accuracy at impossible distances. As they established their position on the mountain ridge, Marcus could see the compound in the distance. Even through his high-powered scope, the buildings looked impossibly small. The idea of hitting a human target at this range seemed absurd. But the voice was constant now, providing a steady stream of information about wind conditions, atmospheric pressure, and target movement. It was like having a supercomputer calculating ballistics in real time, except the calculations accounted for factors that no computer could measure. "The engineer will appear on the third-floor balcony in 47 minutes, the voice told him. "He will stand in the same location for exactly 93 seconds while he reviews overnight security reports. The wind will be optimal for 30 seconds starting at the 50-second mark of his appearance." Marcus relayed the timeline to Jake, who began setting up his spotting equipment. Their communication with command was limited to essential updates only. At this range, even the slightest electronic interference could affect the shot. As the appointed time approached, Marcus felt a calm settle over him unlike anything he had ever experienced. The voice continued to provide updates, but now it was also guiding his breathing, his heart rate, even his muscle tension. It was as if something else was controlling his body's responses to optimize for the shot. "Target acquired," Jake whispered. Through his spotting scope, he could see a figure emerge onto the balcony of the distant building. Marcus tracked the figure through his rifle scope. At this magnification and distance, the man looked like little more than a dot, but Marcus could sense rather than see the exact positioning of his target. The voice began a countdown. 30 seconds until optimal wind conditions. Prepare for firing sequence. Marcus controlled his breathing, feeling his heart rate slow to an almost meditative rhythm. His finger rested lightly on the trigger as the voice provided constant updates on atmospheric conditions. 20 seconds. Wind shift beginning. Adjust elevation 2 clicks. Marcus made the adjustment without conscious thought, his hands responding to the voice's instructions with perfect precision. 10 seconds. Steady wind from the northwest at 12 kilometers per hour. Target is stationary. Through his scope, Marcus could barely make out the figure on the balcony. At 3,247 meters, even the slightest error would mean a complete miss. But the voice was guiding every aspect of the shot with inhuman precision. 5 seconds. Fire on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark. Marcus squeezed the trigger with perfect follow-through, the rifle bucking against his shoulder. The bullet would take over 4 seconds to reach its target, an eternity in sniper terms. Through his scope, Marcus watched the distant figure for what seemed like forever. Then, impossible to see at this distance, but somehow certain, he knew the shot had found its mark. Jake was watching through his spotting scope when confirmation came. Target down. I can see movement in the compound, people running to the balcony. You got him, Mark. You actually got him. But the voice wasn't finished. Extraction compromised. Enemy forces are moving to surround your position. New route required. Marcus immediately began packing his equipment while Jake called for extraction. But their planned route to the pickup point was already blocked by hostile forces that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. How did they find us so fast? Jake asked as they prepared to move. The voice answered what Jake couldn't hear. The engineer was not working alone. His organization has been monitoring for exactly this type of operation. They knew a sniper would be the only viable option and positioned forces to respond immediately. For the next 6 hours, Marcus and Jake fought a running battle through the mountains, guided by the voice's tactical intelligence. Every time enemy forces moved to block their escape, the voice provided alternate routes. When snipers positioned themselves to ambush them, the voice warned of their presence before they could be spotted. The extraction, finally, came at a remote landing zone that the voice had identified as safe. As the helicopter lifted off, Marcus looked back at the mountains where the impossible shot had taken place. Command is calling it the greatest sniper shot in military history, Jake shouted over the helicopter noise. They want to know how you calculated the ballistics for that distance. Marcus smiled, but said nothing. How could he explain that the calculations hadn't been his? That something else had guided not just the shot, but their entire escape? That an invisible presence had been protecting him and guiding his actions for over a year? Back at base, the debriefings were extensive. Intelligence analysts wanted to understand every detail of how the shot had been possible. Ballistics experts studied the data, trying to reverse engineer the calculations. Military leadership wanted to know if the techniques could be replicated by other snipers. But Marcus could only provide conventional explanations. He described his preparation, his equipment, his reading of environmental conditions. He couldn't tell them about the voice that had guided every aspect of the mission. 3 days after the mission, Marcus was alone in his quarters when the voice spoke to him for what he somehow knew would be the last time. Your training is complete, Marcus Rodriguez. You have proven that humans can achieve the impossible when properly guided. The knowledge and instincts you have developed will remain with you. But our direct communication ends here. Wait, Marcus said aloud, not caring if anyone heard him. Who are you? Why did you choose me? What was this all about? For the first time in over a year, the voice answered his questions. We are what you might call guardians. We exist to ensure that certain critical moments in history unfold correctly. You were chosen because of your character, your skill, and your ability to trust without understanding. The engineer's plan would have resulted in the deaths of thousands of innocent people. Your actions prevented that outcome. But why the secrecy? Why didn't you just reveal yourselves? Because humanity must develop its own capabilities. We can guide, but we cannot replace human decision-making and human courage. You made every shot, Marcus. You faced every danger. We merely provided information that you used according to your own judgment and skill. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. Will I ever hear from you again? Perhaps, if the need arises and you are called upon to serve in ways beyond normal human capability. But, for now, you have everything you need to continue protecting others. The voice faded, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. Over the following weeks, he found that his enhanced abilities remained. His shooting accuracy, tactical instincts, and situational awareness had all been permanently improved by his experiences. Years later, Marcus Rodriguez retired from active duty with a record that military historians would study for decades. His confirmed kills, successful missions, and tactical innovations became legendary throughout the special operations community. But Marcus never spoke publicly about the voice that had guided him through his most challenging missions. When younger snipers asked for his secrets, he would tell them to trust their training, study their environment, and always be prepared for the impossible. However, among the SEAL community, stories began to circulate about Marcus's uncanny abilities. Veterans would speak in hushed tones about the missions where he had displayed almost supernatural awareness and precision. Some called it luck. Others attributed it to exceptional skill and preparation. But there were those who suspected something more. They noticed that whenever Marcus had been involved in critical missions, outcomes had been far better than anyone had dared hope. Enemy plans had been disrupted at exactly the right moments. American lives had been saved by margins so narrow they seemed miraculous. These observers began referring to Marcus by a nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life: the Phantom Shooter. A marksman who could see things others couldn't see, know things others couldn't know, and accomplish things others couldn't accomplish. Marcus embraced the legend while never revealing its true source. He understood now that he had been part of something larger than himself, something that operated beyond human understanding to protect innocent life and preserve freedom. And sometimes, in quiet moments when he was alone with his thoughts, Marcus would whisper a simple "thank you" to the silence, hoping that somewhere, somehow, his mysterious guardians could hear his gratitude for the incredible privilege of having served as their instrument in protecting the world from those who would do it harm. The voice had been right about one thing: his training was complete. But Marcus Rodriguez, the Phantom Shooter, would remain ready if he was ever called upon to serve again in ways beyond normal human capability. Because some legends are not just stories. Some legends are promises of protection that continue long after the shooting stops.